go. Oh, dang. Oh, I needed that. Oh, hey, folks. Hope everybody's doing all right. Good to know, Stephen. Thank you very much. Hope everyone's having a good Pride so far. Not too bad. I'm not actually planning to go to that many Pride events this month. The main one that I already went to was actually technically at the end of May. I went to Essex Pride. And that was fun. I had a good time with that. I performed a number. I bought some stuff I didn't need. I'm trying to think if I have anything here to show off. No, I think I just bought stickers. But yeah, no, it was fun. I have for Pride Month written 2 Pride-themed fanfics. Made a Pride-themed fan art and changed my nickname in a Minecraft server to spread trans pride. So overall, not much. Hey, it counts. If you are expressing yourself as yourself and doing so proudly, you are being participatory in pride. So good on you. Love some stickers. Yeah, I need to figure out where I'm going to put them on my car. I was going to say I'm running out of room. I'm not. I've still got like the whole hood and the bit over the front tires to put stickers on. But I'm almost at the point where that's all that's left. Sorry, you can just see it out the window. Ali Louise Board, I can't pronounce that. Won a Tony Award in his speech. He called out the billionaire's fascist colonizer and is pro-Palestine. Good on him. I have no idea who that is or what he won an award for. I was going to say I don't pay attention to the Tonys. I don't really pay attention to award shows, full stop. You know, I'll glance over the Oscars because I used to care, but like Tonys, Oscars, Emmys, Grammys, Hugos, the Game Awards, I do not care. I really don't. I can only imagine that I would only ever care again if somebody who I personally knew was nominated for something. Happy Pride Ally to 3 of my trans friends. Well, that's good, Richard. I'm sure they appreciate you. Plays David in the Broadway production of The Lost Boys. I forgot that that's a thing that now exists. Well, I hope it's good. I have no interest in it just because I really have no interest in the practice of turning movies into Broadway plays at this point. But I mean, I suppose if that's a thing that we're going to keep doing, that was an interesting enough pull. Got my first paycheck from my new job. Oh, good. I hope that you are enjoying the job and that the paycheck was appropriately compensatory. That's something that I hope for all of us, to be honest. But, you know, get what you can. I saw a clip on TikTok. It was a couple years old, but it was really good. This guy was on a Zoom call with HR from his company. And the person from HR asked him, last year you were the top rated employee for your division, for what you do. And it really seems like you've not been nearly as present since then. Is there a reason for that? And he basically said, yeah, there is, because I was the top employee 2 years in a row and I asked for a raise and was denied. And when I asked why I wasn't going to get a raise, I was told that my compensation, that I was being paid fair market value. And when I asked what I was paid on the spectrum of my job, I was told I was being paid below the median. And so I decided to become a fair market employee. And you have created a situation in which there is no incentive for me to work hard, so I don't. You are paying me a below average wage. I will be a below average employee. And you know what? Good for that guy. It's only part-time, but it's really good money. Oh, that's a good combo if you can get it. For sure. Thanks for the encouragement. I feel like only doing Pride online and not IRL makes me feel like I'm not doing an important part of it. The part where you interact with other people. I mean, like, not all of us have the ability or the spoons or feel safe doing it more publicly. So I don't. While the public acknowledgement and spectacle of Pride is very important, you personally not participating does not reflect poorly on you. The Some Like It Hot musical, at least putting on white, non-cishet people in the leads, that's an improvement over the movie, right? I mean, that's unfair, given when the movie was made. I mean, like, strict, if you were to strip it down to technicalities and ignore all context, yes, I suppose that's technically better than the movie, except I'm not even sure if it is, because I guess with Jack Lemmon's character, you could take a position that he's not actually a trans character. Like, these aren't trans characters. You could tinker with it and play an angle that Jack Lemmon's character, I forget the actual character's name, you could tinker with it and say that it sort of becomes a trans awakening for that character, but like canonically in the movie, they are straight men pretending to be women. Like, that's the plot. So I mean, look, I'm not saying it's a problem that they cast non-cis or non-white. I'm just saying that that's not a story where I would have said it's important to put trans people in that if you're going to tell that story again, or, non-cis people in that story. I don't think Some Like It Hot would have been on my list for things to have that stance over. I'm part of a union now. Hey, we love the union. How are you? Hope you're doing well. I am behind on work, annoyingly. But other than that, I am doing okay. Excuse me. Have you heard about the controversy surrounding Patagonia? Oh! Huh. Thank you for asking that, Peter. Okay. I spent a huge chunk of this afternoon trying to remember what the hell it was that I wanted to talk about. Because I could remember that there was a thing I wanted to talk about on stream because I don't have the time to make a video on it, but I couldn't remember what it was, and it was that. Right. Okay. So, I'm probably gonna like clip this out and put it up as like its own video. But let's talk about the company Patagonia and the drag performer Patagonia. Because yes, I am aware. So for anyone who is not caught up, Patagonia, the drag queen, has been performing under that name for years now and has kind of become a bigger deal as time has gone on. She's gone on a national tour. She does a lot of hiking and drag out in the woods and, broadcasting that on Instagram. I actually saw her show when she came to Burlington, Vermont. A drag king friend of mine actually got to perform in that. She is a climate activist. She's a drag performer. She does things like her merch, the shirts that are sold as merch at her shows are reclaimed fabrics, stuff that was like excess or like in some very minor way defective that was going to be thrown out. It's all reclaimed fabric. So she does try and put her money where her mouth is when it comes to climate activism, which is a huge part of what it is that she does. And I am going to be missing questions in the chat while I go over all this, because I want to try and get it all in one go, and then I'll see if people had questions. So, Patagonia, the company, is suing her over... I'm going to use her because the drag persona uses she, her pronouns. Or possibly she, they. I know she is a valid option for the drag persona. But anyways, Patagonia, the company, is suing her for trademark infringement. Now, technically, they're suing her for $1, and they seem to realize that it's a bad look for them a very large and very profitable company to be suing a much smaller, independent, self-sustaining activist and performance artist. So they are officially suing her for only $1, and they claim it's like we've been trying to work with her for a very long time to come to some kind of arrangement or agreement, but we couldn't come to one, so now we're taking this step because we have to protect our trademark. So I got a couple things to go over. Number one, trademark law. I think some of this has actually gotten relaxed in recent decades, but traditionally, if a company is aware of a potential trademark violation, it actually is a massive problem for them to not address it legally in some manner, because there is a thing where if you don't defend your trademark, you risk losing it, because the determination by the trademark office becomes you are not actively using this trademark, because if you cared, you'd be fighting these potential infringements, and you're not. We're going to just let it lapse and or revoke it. That is actually part of the reason why there's the infamous thing where Disney sued a daycare over a mural with Mickey Mouse on it. While, one could have their debates over the manner in which Disney handled that, there is an argument to be made. I'm not saying I agree with it, but there is an argument to be made that Disney kind of had no choice once they realized that that existed, because if it became known that they were aware of infringing things and not doing anything about it, it puts their actual trademark at risk. Now, as I said, I think the strictness of that has been relaxed a little bit in the last few decades, but Patagonia is still saying, like, we need to protect our trademark. So there is a whole thing that I could do about debating whether or not any of Patagonia's merch, because it does seem to be the merch that they're zeroing in on, because her name, Patagonia, is not the exact same. And while if you say it quickly, it sounds the same, that's really defensible as parody or satire or something of that nature. And honestly, so is most of her merch. Where the issue, because remember, under First Amendment, parody, satire, these are protected. You can't sue somebody for copyright or trademark infringement over parody. But there can be an issue where even if it's a parody product, it isn't distinguished enough. The metric that is generally used, and it's a wonky metric, but it's what gets used, is that if a reasonable person might be confused and think that Patagonia actually had been sanctioned or partnered with Patagonia, then there's a risk of it being trademark infringement. Now, some people have gone through like her merch with a fine-tooth comb and like singled in on, say, like there's this sticker that she has where it says Patagonia, but the font is very similar to Patagonia's, and it kind of has a background that, has some rainbows and stuff integrated in it, but the silhouette of the background is very similar to Patagonia's trademarked logo. So from a copyright trademark perspective, there is a case to be made in favor of the company Patagonia. I don't care, though, and here is why. Trademark law, in theory, protects any corporation of any size. Whether it's a small, single-person owned LLC or a massive billion-dollar corporation. In theory, trademark law protects them all equally. In practice, trademark law protects the wealthy and those with the money to swing the legal system like it's a frickin' baseball bat. That is the reality, and that is what Patagonia, the company, is doing. So, personally, I don't care if what Patagonia is doing actually could be said to constitute trademark infringement. Because as far as I'm concerned, the trademark law as we have it is completely screwed. And people will get hung up on but this is the law. Yes, but the law is wrong and inequitable in this case. To give you an idea of how massively weighed in favor of larger corporations trademark law is, trademark is something that isn't owned by a person. Copyright can be owned by a person, but trademarks belong to corporations. So I know because I looked into potentially trademarking Council of Geeks. Now, everything I do under Council of Geeks still falls under copyright. That's automatic and defensible. But I just looked into, as a query, what would it take for me to trademark it? Because I can't just submit that to the trademark office. A corporation cannot be represented by a non-barred individual. Corporations must be represented by barred attorneys and law firms. So while you are allowed to defend yourself as a person in court, you cannot represent your corporation yourself. So before even getting into the costs and fees of what it costs to get something trademarked, I would have had to have gotten a law firm on retainer. And the law firm that I talked to had a $5,000 retainer, meaning before I could even consider filing for a trademark, I would have to pay them $5,000 just to have people who would do that filing for me. And shock of shocks, small LLCs, small companies, most of them don't have just $5,000 laying around. And even if they do, that's just to get the trademark. That says nothing about what it costs you to actually go to court and defend the damn thing. This is what I mean when I say that trademark law as it exists benefits only the wealthy, only massive corporations. And also, while we're on it in general, I try not to swear in the live stream, but to hell with it, fuck Patagonia, the corporation. They have gone so far out of their way to try and paint themselves as one of the good ones in terms of corporations. There was this whole thing where the owner in his will didn't leave it to his family and left it to a nonprofit to help the environment, which was bullshit. Technically, it is what happened, but that nonprofit was newly formed. If he had actually cared about helping an environmental cause, what would have been a far better use of the money would have been to have left it in the hands of an existing and already operating nonprofit for the sake of the environment. The reason that it was set up specifically for this is the same reason that every billionaire sets up a trust, a charity, a nonprofit, etc. It's for tax evasion purposes. If the only goal was to help the environment, a better use of the money would have been to give it to somebody else. But they kept it in-house, formed this nonprofit so that it could benefit their goddamn taxes. There are none of these, or almost none of these corporations, despite how much they spend to make it look like and make us think that they're the good ones. They're not. This includes companies that I even like. I love Ben and Jerry's. They are not nearly as altruistic, as charity-minded, or as environmentally cautious as they paint themselves as. I am aware of that fact, and it ticks me off that they bank and cash in goodwill on the basis of something they are not actually. And it ticks me off for Patagonia for the exact same reason. Patagonia, the company, not the drag queen. So regardless of what the legal specifics are and whether or not any judge or whatever actually finds to be the case for the trademark, I'm on Patagonia's side because fuck these corporations and fuck trademark law as it currently exists. I think that was pretty much all that I had to say. If anybody has any questions about anything I've just rambled about, feel free to ask them now. I will now be checking the chat again. Thank you very much for the super chat, Jennifer Weiss, and a very cute GIF at that. I appreciate you. I see we're mentioning other companies that pull the same kind of nonsense. Aldi. Yeah. You really think there are people in your audience who say, well, that's the law in response to mega corporations suing a drag queen? I hope not. In my regular audience, probably not. But does that mean that people who think that way won't see that? No. Yes, I understand I don't usually have that big a reach past my standard audience, but I'm not trying to make this inaccessible to people who aren't my standard audience. I will just say she based her name on the region in South America, not the actual company. From a legal perspective, that may or may not hold up because, as I said, it depends on the specific design on some of her merch and how much it mimics their stuff. But again, I'm on her side regardless and don't care. I'm curious if the timing of the lawsuit relates to when Patagonia started selling clothes, etc., because trademark law is usually specific to domains. Potentially. Like, the whole thing's very messy, because it also needs to be remembered that when it comes to something like trademark law, and this is a big part of what I mean when I say only large and profitable and rich corporations can afford to wield it, if somebody violates trademark law, that's not a criminal offense. You can't just, point at it and have, the feds or the state AG and say, or the cops and say, go get him. He's infringing on my trademark. You have to defend that yourself. It's a civil case. So you have to afford to be able to bring it. You have to afford to have been able to file for the goddamn trademark in the first place. There is a very high financial barrier to entry for most things that are not, I would say, at least $100 million companies. The legal fees are the killer part of that suit. I may need to rewatch John Oliver on slap suits. There's that too, because regardless of the fact that, like, we're only suing her for $1, yeah, but if she doesn't want to fold immediately to your demands, which, understand, while they're suing her financially for $1, what they want is for her to stop using her name. So unless she's prepared to capitulate to that immediately, regardless of how much money they are suing her for, she has the cost of a legal team to defend herself. Because again, trademark law, you don't get to defend yourself in court. And I guarantee you that Patagonia has probably set up some kind of LLC to, just for the purposes of running the business that underscores her drag work. Like, Council of Geeks is an LLC. The company is basically just me, but it still exists as an LLC. Oh. Between Patagonia and AI, it's looking depressing for art. Funny you mention AI. I am working on the edit. That is going to be the weekend's topic. We're going to be back onto AI, talking about a couple of specific things about AI in films. So, yeah. I assume she'd get a default judgment if she just ignored it. Well, yes. Well, yeah. And exactly what that would look like, I don't know. Again, it's because it involves a lawsuit between corporations rather than just people, the law gets more complicated, and I am not as knowledgeable. Anything that looks like their logo, she explained it was only fan art. Well, if that's true, then they really don't have a leg to stand on. But again, she has to pay whatever the cost of a legal team is to go into court and make that case. Carnegie was no saint, by the way. Of course not. None of them were. Carnegie, Rockefeller, they're all. Look, I've said this before. There is no such thing as an ethical billionaire. And extend that out to anyone who back in, I don't know, the 20s, 30s, 40s, whatever, was the then equivalent of a billionaire. There is literally no way to ethically have that much money. I can think of one and only one person who is a billionaire who I can say I'm not even going to say that they did become a billionaire ethically, but I will say I'd be willing to hear the case. And I can't even remember her name, but it's Jeff Bezos' ex, because she became a billionaire because she divorced him and took him for half of what he was worth. And honestly, I am less inclined to be harsh to someone who became rich because they fleeced a billionaire in a divorce court. You know what? I'm glad somebody did. But, ultimately there is still the argument that the reason he had that much money for her to be able to take half of, none of that was earned ethically. Even if I could make an argument for she got it from him ethically, him getting in the first place was still unethical. There is no ethical way to have that much money. There just isn't. No. If you tell me, oh, but what about, no. No, I reject your question and reject your premise if you try and argue with me on that. How/why is most crime drama still going on? NCIS, SVU, Criminal Minds. I mean, it's an older audience, but they're a consistent audience. I mean, those things will probably start dying off as well as the boomers start to pass of old age, because I can't imagine those are particularly big hits with. I mean, maybe a little with Gen X, not so much millennials, definitely not Gen Z or Gen Alpha. So those things will end eventually, but that kind of viewing does very well with the boomer generation, which still has a decent amount of buying power. How much money does David Attenborough have? Not a clue. I do not know. He's a multimillionaire, not a billionaire. Yeah. And like, to be clear, I'm not automatically saying that multimillionaires are good. Like, here, are you ready for my super hot take? That I would not know how to actually create a society in which this would be enforceable. But here's my super hot take when it comes to the wealthy. My solution, because like if we can't reclaim the money from these billionaires, if we can't fully dismantle the systems that allowed them to get that rich, my proposal would be that anyone with a personal wealth value of $100 million or more is barred from participation in politics in any way other than voting. They are not allowed to have or contribute to PACs. They are not allowed to contribute or even meet with politicians. They are not allowed to be in the same room with them, because they have so much money that their interests are completely detached from that of 99% of the population of this planet. And their voices have no place when things that benefit them come at the expense of literally everybody else. I would bar anyone who is worth that much money from participation in politics, full stop. You can't run, you can't hold office, you can't campaign for somebody, you can't meet with somebody who's in office, nothing. You don't get to touch the political process, because what is in your interest is at the exclusion of nearly everybody else. Actually, I say that's my super hot take. That's actually probably my lukewarm take. My super hot take is I want to institute a maximum wage. Where any income you make over a certain amount gets just taxed at 100%. That's my hotter take, but you know. When Bernie first ran for office in the 70s, one of his policies was capping all salaries at $1 million a year, and I'd be in favor of that. I think a maximum wage is an awesome idea. I think that there should be a maximum amount of money that you can make in a year, and I'd probably set it at $1 million. I don't think anybody needs more than $1 million a year. You don't. I'm sorry, you just don't. And anything you make over that, 100% tax rate on it. Finished watching the show Legion recently, and while I have sort of mixed feelings, I can't deny it's one of the most unique shows I've seen. Thoughts on Holly for Doctor Who showrunner? It'd be interesting, for sure. I never got back for the third, was it 4-season show? I only saw the first 2 seasons, and I liked it. I just never circled back to it. Because it, like, the latter seasons came out after I had cut the cord and I didn't have access to it on the stuff I had streaming, and I've just never circled back. But yeah, Noah Hawley's a really interesting showrunner. I'm hoping that he will give a proper finale in the next season of Alien Earth. I was really liking Alien Earth up until the finale. It's not even that the finale was bad as an episode, it was just bad as a finale. Billionaires don't typically make much in wages. Well, that's the other thing, imperfection in action. If you think I would limit this to just salaries, then you don't realize how much I've thought about this. I would include stock dividends. I would include interest paid to them from the banks. I would include frickin' everything. Really enjoying your Game Changer reviews. Are you planning to do more reviews of Dropout content in the break room at some point? I don't know. I'm not going to promise that. Because like the two main things I go out of my way to watch when they are fresh are Game Changer and Make Some Noise. And as much as I like Make Some Noise, I think that would make for a very poor thing to try and review because its structure is so rigid and there's so many prompts. Like it's trying to do it would be like trying to do individual episode reviews of Whose Line Is It Anyway? I'd just be reciting the good bits, and there isn't an overall structure of the thing for me to talk about. And while I've seen some other stuff, I'm not sure it's anything I'd want to talk about. Like I've watched Gastronauts, I've watched Crowd Control. I have real mixed feelings on Crowd Control, which is frustrating because I really loved the Game Changer episode that spawned that spinoff. I've got issues with that show though, and like there was one very specific thing it did that actually really kind of ticked me off. But VIP, very important people, I'm not actually a huge fan of because again I don't like long form improv that much. So very important people is one of those shows where like I'll happily watch a highlight reel, but I don't really want to sit down and watch full episodes. So all that to say, no, I'm not really planning to do episode by episode reviews of too much other Dropout stuff at present. With policies like that, I always think if you had enough political power to do that, why not just get rid of capitalism? Well, yeah, sure, if we're just gonna dream. Had an absolute amazing time at the Amazing Digital Circus finale. Appreciated your spoiler-free review. Still itching inside. Very anxious to talk to people about their thoughts on what happened. I am going to be tackling that, not this coming weekend, but the weekend after. I got to start working on that script once I'm done with the video I'm working on now. I need to check the Discord for the questions there. So I'm going to hop over there. I'll be back in the chat here in a few minutes. Any thoughts on the show, on the TV show Big Bang Theory and its spinoff Young Sheldon? I have zero thoughts on Young Sheldon because I've never seen it and never will, because what little bits of the Big Bang Theory I have absolutely no interest in. It's just not for me. I think what I saw of it to me was base level, the exact same look at these nerds jokes that have been the standard for those kinds of characters since Revenge of the Nerds in the mid 80s. The humor hasn't evolved. It just drops more contemporary references, and I don't like it. I don't think it's funny. So there's my thoughts. I know that Hollywood has a pattern based on what I'm going to be asking, but for my specific question, why in Marvel comic book comics and movies, they always have Reed Richard make stupid decisions despite him being the smartest man alive? Like, for example, in the film Doctor Strange of the Multiverse of Madness, that version of Reed tells Wanda about Black Bolt's power despite knowing her reality warping powers. Basically, it just comes down to the simple fact that trying to write the smartest man alive is an incredibly difficult thing to do, because to write a very smart character, you kind of have to be a very smart person. And that's not me calling the writers idiots, but I'm saying by the nature of what that character is supposed to be, anyone who writes him is trying to write someone far smarter than they are, which creates a little bit of a disconnect when a lot of the very standard sort of flaws and tropes that are done with nearly every character get done with him, because it feels disjointed, because he should be smarter than that. So why does it happen? Because it's very difficult to write smart people. That's why. Do you know why the rainbow became a symbol of the queer community? I know that, like, its official origin, I forget the name of the artist, but it was at Harvey Milk's request to come up with a flag, and the rainbow was chosen because it was meant to represent the diversity of, I mean, at the time mostly gay, but queer people. So, the multitude of colors. I can't find a confirmation that this is the case, but I have to imagine this was in the mix. I have to imagine that at least part of the reason it was a rainbow pattern specifically, as opposed to just any other blend of colors, is because for a very long time, a code phrase for gay people was friend of Dorothy, as in Dorothy Gale, as in The Wizard of Oz, as in Somewhere Over the Rainbow. Do you find asshole characters less annoying if their assholishness seems like an understandable response to the situation they're in? Like when I was watching The Amazing Digital Circus, I found Jax much less annoying than someone like BoJack Horseman or Gregory House MD, and I think it's because turning into pricks is much more reasonable as a coping mechanism in his situation. No, usually whether or not I am up for dealing with an asshole character has a lot more to do with their position within the story. Like, I liked House at the time. I have a feeling I'd probably get annoyed with it going back and trying to rewatch it now, because I'm at a point where the narrative does, not 100% of the time, but by and large, treats it as it's okay for him to be an asshole because he's right and because he's smart, and I don't agree. I'm not sure I'd personally would lump BoJack Horseman into that same category, although there was a little bit of that in the first season, which is how far I've gotten so far. Where he at least seems to think that because he has some points to make or some good digs to land on people, that it makes it okay for him to be the way he is. But I don't think the narrative agrees, which makes it go down better. For me, that's the bigger kicker. Not what their circumstances are, but whether or not it feels like the story being told thinks that it's okay that they're an asshole. Like, as much frustration as I have with Battlestar Galactica, Baltar's great because the show frequently does not side with his nonsense and paints him as the jackass he is. What would you think about a production making the choice to not cast a trans actor as a trans character in order to make the transition more of a reveal? Like, people might figure out where the character arc is going if the actor is trans, so you cast a cis actor. Okay, I'm going to say this as calmly as I can. I need to get a sign. I need to get a neon sign that I can light up, and it just says, "Don't ask me hypotheticals." Because I keep saying this. I can sometimes, but my general rule of thumb with a hypothetical is if and when it happens, I will deal with it and talk about it then. I don't like engaging with these super specific hypotheticals of non-existent situations. I understand other people are good at that. Other people enjoy doing that. I do not. I feel like that Simpsons meme. Don't make me tap the sign. I just need to get a sign. If you're going to do a bad guy redemption arc, how important is it to have a character like Alan the Alien in the story? That's an Invincible character for folks who don't know, i.e. at least one good guy character who has a very reformative justice mindset, who's pushing the bad guy to reform before they even fully on board with it themselves. I don't think that's essential or not. I think that's completely optional. I think the reason Alan was important to Invincible as a story is because Invincible made a point of being very clear that the people who Nolan had hurt are not going to forgive him right now. So, there are other ways to go about it, but for the way that story was being told, I think Alan was a very good addition, but I don't think a character like Alan is a necessity to make a redemption work. Is the success of Obsession and with the success of Obsession and the Backrooms, do you think independently made movies have a chance of becoming a major presence in the film industry the same way indie games have become in the game industry? No. For logistical reasons. Actually, basically for gatekeeping reasons. Here's the thing. At this point, on PC especially, and I'd say largely on Nintendo, I don't know what the situation on Xbox and PlayStation are, but the indie games, like let's just talk PC for a minute. If you are getting a PC game, odds are you're probably getting it from Steam. And on Steam, a game made by literally one person has access to the exact same marketplace as a game made by a multi-billion-dollar corporation. They get access to the same potential buyer's pool via the same outlet. Film has much stronger gatekeepers. So we can point to Obsession and the Backrooms, but those had to be partnered with larger companies, with larger studios to distribute them to theaters. An independent film, a truly independent film that has nothing touching the Hollywood system, can't get mass distribution in theaters. It just can't. It does not have access to that marketplace. Same with streaming for that matter. Like, those movies are going to end up on Max or Netflix or Disney or whatever, but it's because they're already successful and those things will want them. And an independent creator who has not partnered with a larger corporation can't get their stuff onto a streaming service, very likely. So the gatekeeping is far stronger, and that is the cap on how much indie could like take over the industry. Now, to be clear, I'm not even necessarily saying that indie projects should have the same degree of access that does in like on Steam, because the flip side of that, while it does give indie things access to the same marketplace and the same outlet and have access to the same customer base, there is so little vetting at Steam that there is a lot of literal garbage on there. So you do have to kind of wade through a ton of stuff that is technically indie, but is also trash to find the good indie stuff. So I would like to think that either could benefit a little bit from a happy medium of like, okay, can we vet a little bit more than Steam does, but also open up the gates a fair bit more than what the film distribution, be it streaming or theaters, is doing. But yeah, massive difference in gatekeeping. So no, it can't quite mirror what has gone on with indie games. So like here's the big thing. Team Cherry, who had the release of Silksong last year, they published that themselves. They could have partnered with a larger publisher, but they didn't need to, and they knew they didn't need to. If the folks who made Obsession didn't partner with, hold on, who was it? Who distributed Obsession? Let me check that. Obsession. Focus Features. If the folks who made Obsession hadn't partnered with Focus Features, it would not have been able to be in theaters. So that's the difference. I know someone who is blind and says generative AI has made it easier for her to live with her disability because she has an app that lets her take a picture of what's in front of her, and AI will generate a description of what she would be able to see if she was able to see. If AI was used in more ways to help people like this and less to make AI slop, would you still have a problem with it existing? Yes, I would. And I'm sorry. Like, I'm sorry. The use that your friend has found for this is, as far as a use case, far more defensible than most of what AI is used for. But unfortunately, even the defensible applications still have to contend with the issue that between data centers, server farms, water usage, and just all this other stuff, the damage done by AI and AI models, I'm sorry, it's not justifiable. All right, let me put it this way. If we were to quantify it, rather than like it's using AI, if we talked about the direct impact. So like, if instead of asking me, well, like this thing helps her and it uses generative AI, what if the question was, this thing helps her, but it poisons the water supply of a town with a population of 5,000? This thing helps her see, but it effectively burns down 100 acres of rainforest. This thing helps her, but it will drive up the electrical costs of half a state, to the point that people will not be able to afford food because they have to pay a raised electricity bill. If you thought of it those ways, would you still be asking that question? Would you think that that use is worth that damage? There's a little comic that goes around Blue Sky every now and then. I think sums it up even more succinctly than I would. Somebody goes like, hey, we built this machine that'll answer any question you ask it. Oh, well, that sounds great. Yeah. And all you have to do to keep it working is to feed it 10 baby giraffes every single day. Oh, well, it at least gives right answers. Yes? No, it doesn't. If you think about the actual impact and the actual cost of AI, I'm sorry, I don't think there is a defensible use because you can't do it small scale. AI and the way that it works demands mass scaling, demands these data centers. And I do not think that you can come up with enough use cases like that where the specific case is defensible. But when you factor in the damage that is done in order for that technology to be able to exist, I'm sorry, no, it's still not okay. And that sucks. That sucks for the handful of actual beneficial use cases. It absolutely does. But still no. Do you think it's fair that people tend to be more skeptical about allegations against people who have died? For example, I was thinking the other day about how 9 people made accusations against Michael Jackson, but the general public tend to side with Michael because most of those allegations were made after he died. Was it most? I mean, I guess numerically it was. Like, there were some... Like, I remember in the 90s when that stuff started. But by the time about the same number of accusers made accusations against Neil Gaiman, the general public were much quicker to side with his accusers. I think there must be more to it and I think there must be more to it that the often cited explanation, than the often cited explanation that it's unfair to judge people like MJ because they aren't allowed to defend themselves, because whenever a living abuser like Gaiman actually does try to defend themselves, it usually makes little to no difference in the public's perception of them anyway. I think it is actually probably more to do with the case where once somebody is dead, you no longer have to worry about your defense of them potentially enabling them to do more harm. So if Michael Jackson was still around and you were defending him now, there was the possibility that you were basically helping enable him to continue to do more harm. Once somebody's dead, that's no longer in the mix. And I think that might be part of the shift that happens with some folks. Anyways, I am back. I am back with the main chat. No Dimension 20? No, there's too much. I don't have the time for Dimension 20. That's the issue with that one. Let's see. Disability cannot be weaponized as a shield, honestly. I'm glad you're the one who said that context, but yes, I agree. Does it have to be all or nothing? Like, couldn't there be more specialized, regulated, maybe even more environmentally sustainable application of it with Gen AI? Not really. I mean, it would require a complete strip down of the technology and rebuilding it from scratch, which, given the damage it's already done, I'm not in favor of either. The thing that needs to be remembered about AI is you cannot small scale it. It has to be large scale. The amount of information that you have to feed it and the ability to store, process that information requires these massive goddamn data centers. Even if you're using it for something small, you still have to implement it at scale. That's how the technology works. It's not called a large language model for nothing. No matter how small the question you're asking it is, the data set it's pulling from is so huge, it demands these massive data centers and all the problems that come with them. So, no. It is, I'm sorry, it is kind of an all or nothing with the technology as it exists. For it to not be all or nothing for me, it literally has to be a completely different technology working on a different principle that doesn't require the same things. So, yeah. Doesn't defending Jackson kind of help abusers in general? Arguably, but that, I really don't have the spoons to have that conversation right now. I would be curious for your thoughts on Golden Girls as a series, especially given its shockingly progressive politics for primetime in the 80s. I'm not sure they were that shocking. I mean, like a little bit in terms of they actually address some queer issues here and there. But like, there was a lot more progressive, like it started honestly really dulling in the 90s. There was a lot more progressive stuff out there in the 80s than people tend to remember. But Golden Girls is good. It's a good show. I like it. Sophia's the best character. If you were gonna ask me which one are you and sort of that like which Ninja Turtle are you or which member of Sex and the City are you, I'm Blanche. I like Golden Girls. I would never have enough thoughts to like do a deep dive on it, but I like the Golden Girls. Thank you for the detailed response. I didn't actually consider the inherent scope of it. No problem. I'm happy to help. Well, I'm happy to rant and hope that it helps. I suppose that's a more realistic description of what it is I do. I rant in a vaguely directed fashion and hope that it helps. If universal design were properly applied and disability didn't have stigma and exploitation, we wouldn't have poster child cases at all. Yeah. Boy. Disability accommodations help everybody. And if you don't need them, don't use them. But they help literally everybody. It becomes a thing that is available for all people to use. It's just... What's my favorite indie tabletop RPG? I have not played very many indie TTRPGs. I am not as well versed in TTRPGs as you might believe me to be. The thing that you need to remember with my kind of geekery and my kind of ADHD, my breadth of knowledge is wide, but not especially deep. It's deep on some specific things. Like, I know a good amount about Doctor Who, for sure. But, like, you know, tabletop RPGs, I've played a bit, mostly Dungeons and Dragons, played a few others. I'm not sure any of them counted as indie. I just don't do it enough to have that repertoire. Again, I know about a lot of things, but I don't know deeply about a lot of things. Drew Lytle, thank you very much for the super chat. You've talked about going to Rose City Comic-Con and possibly going again this year. First, I live an hour away, so might attend. Second, why RCCC? I do plan to go again this year, and it's because I have people in the area that it is very important for me to get to see. And having an event to base that trip around makes it a lot easier for me to execute on actually getting out there. See, I'm the opposite. I know a lot about very specific things. Speaking of Golden Girls, have you seen Golden Palace? No, I know what it is, and I know it existed. No, I never saw any of that. The middle question for me was about the Amazing Digital Circus. The short answer to your question, 255, is that if you are telling a completely pre-transition story, it is more defensible to cast a non-trans person for that part. I would still prefer that you find a trans person. Like, look, not that I'm trying to, like, necessarily pitch myself. Like, you go by voice. I don't sound like a trans woman. You want to cast me as a pre-transition person as a voice? I'll freaking do it. And I guarantee I'm not the only one. But I don't, my general stance is unmoved. In the case of the Amazing Digital Circus specifically, it's weird and complicated and hard to talk about. I don't personally have an issue with the choices that show made, but that does not alter my overall stance. Yeah, Portland is an hour south of me, so I can train down to it for a day. I might attend for other content creators as well, but if I go, I'll keep an eye out for you. Keep in mind, Saturday's usually the day I'm actually on the con floor. Coyote Azul, thank you very much for the super chat. I appreciate you. There's an indie TTRPG coming called Excuse Me, Wizard, I Have a Problem. Love the title. That's fun. Is Digital Circus huge in America? I'm from the UK and never heard of it until watching your Villains by Obligation video. I actually don't know because It's released on Glitch Productions, which is a YouTube channel. I'd have to, like, I don't have access to their back end metrics and like what their what their God, what is the freaking word? Why can't I think of the word now? Analytics. I don't have access to their analytics data, so they would be the ones who could tell you what regions it's actually been in. At a guess, yeah, it's probably bigger in America, but I have no idea. Do you think the trans issues will ever become good, or like Tiptoe says, it'll just get worse? It depends if and when people are ready to actually do something about fascists. Because TERF ideology is a fascist ideology. That's why they are in bed with so many of them. So, will it only ever get worse? I don't know. I'd like to think it won't. But I don't know. It'd be lovely to see it get better in my lifetime. Or failing that, my kid's lifetime. The final episode is currently number 2 at the UK cinema box office, so that would be a yes. Yeah, it made number 5 nationally in the US. By the Fathom events, which was like, they do limited like 1 weekend engagements. That's like their whole thing. It was by far the biggest opening they'd ever had for anything they were integrated with. Anselin, casting directors could at least fucking try. Yeah, there is that. I cannot what was it? Oh, it was The Last of Us. They claimed to have inclusive casting. Going forward, I didn't give them a pass. I said that that's a useless phrase because you don't define what the hell that means. But going forward, I'm going to reject that as a defense of casting a cisgender person in a trans role, for the very simple reason that it is too easily used as a shield to go like, well, it was inclusive casting. We had trans people in the mix. We just thought this cis person was better. Yeah, but did you actually seriously consider the trans people? Or were they just there so you could claim you considered them and you were always planning to cast a cis person in the first place? And if you actually care, don't you want to avoid having that perception? Digital Circus, very big right now on certain sides of the internet. Maybe I'm just too old to have heard of it then. I mean, like, the fandom on that one does skew young, which is one of the things I'm going to have to talk about in the video, because as much as I would love, when I get around to it, to talk only about the show, I'm going to have to talk about that fandom, because holy shit. Like, I say this as someone who has been talking about toxic fan bases for close to a decade. The fan base for the Amazing Digital Circus, they are something else. They are terrifying. Hey, Nit, good to see you. Thanks for stopping in. Why would being old mean you wouldn't hear of the Amazing Digital Circus? Generally curious. Well, it's a completely online-based fandom. Like, it is technically now streaming on Netflix. I have no idea what those numbers are like. But, like, it was birthed on YouTube. The fandom's entirely on YouTube. It's never had a theatrical release prior to this. It's a 100% internet-based thing, which just by its nature is going to skew young as opposed to old. A podcaster I follow tried to do a bad right-wing books club. Oh, good grief. Me and some other people had to tell him we're not willing to read terrible books to take part in that. Yeah, good call. Like, if that person wants to just read them on his own and then give a book report to everybody else, by all means, go for that. I've seen some good stuff from that. Jose, who's a YouTuber I really respect, has done that multiple times, and that can be very entertaining. But, like, yeah, don't encourage anyone else to read that stuff, even ironically. Yeah, the TATC fandom is fucked. Yeah, it's really bad. Really bad. Like, that explain to Daddy Bubble how bad thing. What's fascinating about the toxicity of the Amazing Digital Circus fandom, and like this is a factor that has never been in play for anything else that I've ever observed the toxic fandoms of, because the stuff that I've been aware of and knew well enough to know what the fandom was like have all been older things. Star Wars, Star Trek, Doctor Who. And so when I've talked about, fandoms being toxic, a big part of that conversation for me up to this point has always been, well, there's people, who have been around for a while, and like as this thing has changed, their view of it changed, so they get really toxic about it and claim it was good like 20 years ago. But the Amazing Digital Circus is 9 episodes long and 3 years old. It is so new, and it got toxic so fast. Like, nostalgia can't even be a factor. And normally that's a pretty big factor in my assessment of toxic fandom behaviors. So it's just so weird that that can't be a factor in this one. There has to be other stuff going on. It's yeah. Everything great has a trash fandom. Observe Undertale. My experience with the Undertale fandom, and granted it's been very limited, so keep that in mind. But my experience with the Undertale fandom was that they are overzealous. Not necessarily toxic, but again, I have not had to come in as much contact with that fandom. TADC, they're not just zealous, they are legit toxic. Like they are so bad that Gooseworks, the creator of that show, has basically implied that they're not going to make anything like that ever again, because this whole experience has been so terrible because of the fans. Yeah. Online media gets huge in bubbles, and if you're not in those bubbles, it's very easy for even huge things to just pass you by. That's true. I didn't know what the hell Mr. Beast was actually famous for until about a year ago. And I didn't even learn that on purpose. I just eventually I got it through osmosis, even though I never went out of my way to learn a damn thing about the guy. And he's been like the biggest YouTuber in the world for like 3 years. I had no idea what it was he did until like a year ago. I finally kind of got enough of a sense. I'm like, oh, he's that kind of YouTuber. So yeah, it is absolutely possible, no matter how big a thing it is, if it's completely online or almost completely online, that it still just bypasses you. I've seen YouTubers quit Undertale because they were getting verbally attacked for not playing the game exactly as they expected, and everyone had different expectations. I have heard of that. I didn't experience that. I streamed that game back when I was still doing stuff on Twitch. But yeah. There's a 2002 BBC radio version of I Have No Mouth and I Must Scream with Harlan Ellison himself as Am. That's not surprising. He voiced Am for the 90s point-and-click adventure game based off that too. I've actually gone over time. I am just now noticing. If your kid never mentioned Mr. Beast to you, it means you're a good parent. Thank you, 255. I'll take it. What do you think of being a huge fan of something where there's a toxic fandom? I want to interact, but the fans I interact with anywhere other than AO3 have been media illiterate and angry. Yeah, like, here's the thing. I actually don't participate very much in fandom stuff for many things. Like, the most things that I participate in is Doctor Who, and even then, it's basically just going to Gallifrey 1 and maybe checking some of the subreddits every now and then. Other than that, I don't dig into fandoms because I don't enjoy them. Like, here's what I love. I love finding another person who's an individual who's also a fan, and we can just shoot the shit about the thing for ages. That's great. That's the best. You put me in a group, and like, especially online, and I'm quickly gonna start going, oh, I'm just gonna leave. And speaking of just leaving, I need to wrap it up. I have more editing to do, and I have a dog who needs a walk. So thank you very, very much for tuning in with me for this one. I'm going to try and clip out my rant about Patagonia and Patagonia and probably release that as its own video. Maybe for tomorrow. Shit, I've got so much editing to do. I'm going to have to do it soon because otherwise it'll be irrelevant. But anyways, because like I did that too when I did... when I talked about the purchase of Warner Brothers. But anyways, thank you very much for joining me. Take care of yourselves. Be safe out there. Happy Pride. And be sure you be well, be safe, be kind. And please remember that you are beautiful, you are valid, and you are loved. You are the council. I am just running the meetings. And until next time, this council is adjourned. McCavity!